Whether Astaldi builds a dome or not, the important thing is the project is done on time and on budget. That's the message from Nalcor about a partially scrapped cover system at Muskrat Falls. The cover, which is sometimes called the dome, was supposed to shield all 4 powerhouse units from the elements so that work could continue through the winter. But only 2 units were covered, and a steel shell around the other 2 units was torn down and sent to the scrapyard. For more on this, we're joined by Nalcor VP Gilbert Bennett. He oversees the Muskrat Falls project. Mr. Bennett, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Bailey.
So I guess the first question is, why was this structure partially removed?
So the decision with the structure, the integrated cover system, was one taken by Astaldi. I mean, they're looking at their management of the construction work, and they've made a decision that they would they're be more productive and more effective to continue work without using half the cover system. And that was a decision they had taken quite early this year, that they had said that was their preferred approach to undertake the work at site.
Okay, erecting this cover structure was part of Astaldi's initial bid, so is Astaldi still living up to their end of the deal by proceeding without it?
So when we look at our arrangement with Astaldi, what we're interested in seeing is them construct a powerhouse and spillway. I'd look at the cover system as being part of any number of temporary facilities they're going to need in order to build a site. So, for example, they need garages to maintain their equipment, they need workshops, they have some administrative buildings, they have trucks, heavy equipment, cranes, and a whole host of other equipment that they need to build a job. What we're really interested in, our key concern, is seeing the powerhouse and spillway get built. How they do it, the techniques they use, are ultimately their decision in terms of managing their construction activity.
Okay, this structure, which is known as the dome, was supposed to be complete in December, and it wasn't, and then it had to be dismantled. So how does that affect the schedule overall for the project?
So that's Astaldi's job to manage the project and look at productivity across the board and to maintain the milestones and commitments that they've made in our contract associated with the powerhouse and spillway. So that I look at that as a project management question on their part. So they look at the risks and benefits associated with that course of action compared to the one they've chosen to use half the cover system. They've concluded that this is a better way to complete the work. Then that's a decision that they would take.
But in a recent report from the Muskrat Falls Project Oversight Committee, it says the decision to not complete the ICS over Units 3 and 4 will impact the schedule process. So is it now back on schedule? Are you behind schedule?
So we're looking for them to recover the schedule. I think that may be a reference in the report to that as well, that their objective and their milestones and their contract says here are the deadline, here are the dates we're looking for, and we'll look to them to manage those dates. I think we do talk about seeing Astaldi improve their performance and recover those delays.
So right now, are they meeting those milestones and dates?
They're improving. There's no question about that. What the work we're seeing at site, the progress is improving. We'll have a lot more detail on the overall extent of that progress once we get the next oversight committee report.
So they're not meeting the milestones and dates right now.
I said they're improving, and their objective is to meet the milestone at the end of the project when they deliver us the powerhouse and spillway. So on a day-to-day basis, all of our contractors, have situations where they're ahead a little bit, they're behind a little bit, they need a recovery plan, they need to change the plan. Those issues are day-to-day project management. What we're interested in is progress towards our key milestone dates. But they'll need to recover the delays that they've seen.
How much wiggle room is there to make up time, though? I mean, I assume that the schedule is quite full as it is. How can you make up time?
So it depends on the aspect of the project that you're looking at. There are places where there is float in the schedule, so a key milestone date has some room compared to another. So one example of that would have been the diversion in the river. So there's been some concern raised about us moving that milestone from 16 into 17, and again, that's a an area where we do have some float. So there are places where, you look through the project progress, and there is a critical path where issues pile up, and then there are other places where we do have float. Another area where you might look at, progress is, in areas where you have a large number of units of work to do. If you improve your process, improve your productivity, you can still get to the end on time.
Okay, Natural Resources Minister Derek Daly said in the House of Assembly earlier this week that this delay won't cost taxpayers anything extra. But what about the amount of money that was budgeted to build this integrated cover system in the first place? If it wasn't needed, can you get that money back, or is that money wasted?
So when we look at, that cover system, I look at that in the same way as any other of a long list of consumable items and temporary components that are going to be used as part of the project. So when Astaldi put their proposal together, that was the technique that they had proposed in order to build their proposal. And ultimately, our contract, as I said, is to see the powerhouse and spillway built. How they do that is an area where they ultimately decide how they want to approach the contract and approach the construction of the project. So we don't see, for example, we wouldn't be looking specifically at the ICS to say, well, that was a project deliverable. It was a temporary installation, just like many others that they're going to use on the project in order to get to the end goal.
But if it was a temporary installation that wasn't needed or not fully needed in the way that it was originally planned, could that not have saved Nalcor millions of dollars by excluding it or getting some money back? Well,
you have to look at those decisions and the approach that the contractor uses to ultimately put their response to the RFP together. And they said, well, that's a technique they used. I mean, there are in any large scale project that are risks that are arising. There are strategies that you use to mitigate that risk. And then you may look at it at some point in time down the road, as Astaldi has done, and said, well, no, there may be a better way to mitigate that risk. So those are ongoing decisions that any contractor would be undertaking as part of the management of their project. So you're continually looking at the benefit of some of those approaches. If that approach is not delivering the benefit that they're looking for, then they would change their approach and say, okay, this may be a better path forward. So that's project management, and that's what we see, to differing scales on a day-to-day basis throughout the project, as those decisions get made in order to optimize performance.
Okay, yesterday we talked on the show to political blogger Desmond Sullivan, and he said that this whole situation indicated poor planning on Nalcor's part. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, the approach in using the ICS and the cover system and the techniques that they're using for construction was a conscious decision taken by Astaldi. There's no specification on our part on how we wanted to see the project built. What we did look at is an extensive expression of interest process, a search for qualified contractors, a comprehensive request for proposal process, multiple responses from the global construction community on proposals to build the powerhouse and spillway, and we selected Astaldi through a very rigorous process that was subject to internal management review internally within Nalcor, and then ultimately will be seen by Canada's independent engineer, and today with our oversight committee from the province. So, to say that it's poor planning on our part, I can't accept. I can't accept that comment. Ultimately, the approach used to develop Muskrat Falls and the ICS or other construction techniques are within the domain of our construction contractors.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening, and we've had a number of emails and calls to this nature that says, I just don't understand what the money went to. That's money out the window because that structure was never built and apparently was never needed. What would you say to somebody who says that? So
I think, when folks who are into large-scale construction look at that situation, they say that there are many times when you make investment in temporary works, and there are also situations where you look at the benefits and risks associated with that course of action, and if you change approaches, it's in response to a risk that's arisen or a benefit that now presents itself, and that's project management. That is what happens in large-scale projects on a regular basis to varying scales. So, if I looked at maybe situations where you're having your house built, and the contractor, you say to the contractor, okay, we've agreed on a price, your job is to build my house. Specifically, how they go about doing that is within their realm. It's their decisions to make. What you want at the end of the day is you want to see your house constructed, and you want to see it for the price that you contracted for, and you want to see it on schedule. We're saying exactly the same thing about the powerhouse and spillway.
But what if it turns out that my contractor can build my house for significantly less than I thought because they don't need to build a certain part of it as previously thought?
I think your contractor would say, I contracted you to build my house at this price. You should be happy with that price because you signed the contract, and that's the process that you entered into. That's the contract and arrangement you've entered into. If you were to say, well, what I'd like to do is pay you for whatever you expend, and I'll give you a markup on that, that's a very different contract. And in that conversation, you may be exposed to very different risks. So, for example, in that case, if you're looking to get the benefit from the contractor back, there may be another scenario where the contractor will say, okay, on that basis, if I'm exposed to additional cost, you may end up paying for that. So the whole contracting strategy, the risks that lie with the contractor, the risks that we incur, is a very important consideration when we look at the commercial management of the project. And if you're looking for those upside opportunities, you may introduce an exposure to a downside cost increase that might go along with that.
All right, well, we'll leave it there for this morning, Mr. Bennett. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Bailey. Great to talk to you.
Gilbert Bennett is Vice President in charge of the Lower Churchill project at Nalcor.